So, this is a short video about how I wired in my Satnav to my V85TT. Back in the day, fitting anything electrical to a bike was kind of a minefield really. It was all shonky Scotch lock connectors, which are these things. If you've not seen them before, they actually pierce the existing wiring loom. So you ended up with a load of these, lots of insulating tape and the occasional small fire, or maybe that was just me. This is my third Italian bike in a row now. I must be a sucker for punishment. And they've all made use of AMP superseal connectors, which makes life a lot easier. Both my old 1000 Multistrada V7 and this bike have at least one spare connector tucked away somewhere, typically either for attaching heater grips or a USB power supply. On the V85 there's actually a space for the factory USB power supply accessory, which I believe clips on here. It actually says USB, and there is a socket hidden away that you can use to plug other things into. It's a switched socket, so that's exactly what you need typically. If you're lucky, you'll be able to find the connector somewhere around here without too much trouble. Mine was actually tucked right down inside. I had to take the battery out to find the connector, and this is the actual connector here with my wiring plugged into it. So that will be dangling somewhere off the wiring loom, hidden somewhere in that area. As I said, if you're lucky it'll be very visible. If not, you might have to go hunting for it. It will have a blanking plug in it, which looks like this. That's the end you'll see. That's actually inside the connector. So they clip in a blanking plug to stop all the crud getting in there. And as you can see, they're reasonably waterproof, pretty good connectors these. So what I've got here is my leftover Satnav wiring, and instead of cutting it short I typically just zip tie it all together neatly out of the way. And it tucks down in here out of the way, so if I ever want to remove it, fit it to another bike, I've still got the full length of cable available to me. You can find these superseal connectors easily enough. If you search AMP superseal, as AMP superseal, that'll get you started and you'll start to see them everywhere. Typically they're 2 or 3 pin, the ones that I've seen used. You can buy them like this. It's just the actual raw components of the connector, which requires you to crimp and reassemble them and put them all together, which can be a bit of a pain. Or if you're lazy like me, you just buy some with the tails already connected. They're already wired in, so you don't have to do anything with the connector itself. You just have to make connections to the actual wires. These were around between £5 and £10 in the UK about 2 or 3 years ago, so not too bad. That was a pack of 5. What you do need to be reasonably competent at is making the electrical connection to the tails and to your Satnav wiring. Typically in vehicle connections you use crimp connectors. I know some people solder as well. For me, I've never had any issue just using the crimp connector, so that's what I tend to do. Note that the Tomtom Satnav wires used here are very, very fine gauge, so you need to bear that in mind if you're crimping them. Typically I will put heat shrink over the connectors once I've crimped them, just to keep the worst of the weather out. I've also used self-amalgamating tape in the past. That works quite well. Insulation tape will work, but personally I see that as a last resort because it always seems to degrade and eventually unwind itself into a manky mess in the wiring, so I try and use heat shrink or self-amalgamating tape these days. So as for the wire routing, I've just taken the little plastic tool tray thing out here to make it a bit more obvious what I've done. You can see down here I've just zip tied onto a nearby piece of the wiring loom, and then I don't know how easy this is going to be to film. Shine a torch in here. The cable actually runs under the side panel and then along, and is kind of hooked behind some brackets on the frame. So I actually took the side panel off. So I actually loosened the side panel just so I could get the connector in there. And then what I've done is brought the cable out over the frame, tucked it up over the top of the cylinder head, and then up around here, and this is the cable coming out here. So what you can do is kind of pull the plastic away slightly and kind of hoik the cable up inside. So I've been quite lazy. I haven't taken the tank or the panels off. I've just fed the wire and pulled it up away from the cylinder heads. So far it's stayed in place and doesn't seem to have got too hot, so that seems to be working. Again, you can see another cable tie here just to hold it onto the wiring loom. Once you get to this point, then it just depends how you're mounting a sat-nav as to what you do with your wire. It's up to you to find a route that is clear of any obstructions. Obviously test the handlebars at full lock in both directions to make sure the cable doesn't get pulled tight or snagged anywhere. So to actually mount the sat-nav itself, on previous bikes I have been using a ram mount that just fitted on the bars, but I found clearance is a bit of an issue on the V85, and also it's quite nice to have it mounted up above the instruments, which is where a lot of people tend to fit them. After some interneting, I ended up getting this frame mount from a place called Gimpo Garage in Germany. I have no connection with them other than as a customer. He seems to make some electronics for the Stelvio, I think, but he also sells these mounting frames for the V85 and the Stelvio. I bought the frame itself, this sort of 3D printed clamp at the back, a set of screws that would fit the Tomtom mount, and also a kind of an insert that fits on the bar in case I want to mount something else on there later as well. All in all, it was about €90 delivered from Germany to the UK, which isn't too bad. It also came with some of the most comprehensive instructions I've ever had on anything, so top marks to him for that. I'm not going to take it all off just so I can film me fitting it again, but basically it comes with everything you need pretty much. You just take off the screen, reattach the screen with the supplied fixings, which are slightly longer, with the frame in between the screen and the bike. And then if you've bought extra bits like this mount, then they come with their own instructions as well. If you've got your own mounts that will fit on a bar, then obviously you use that. All I had was this Tomtom kind of sat-nav mount that was fitted to the RAM backing plate. So I took the RAM plate off and screwed it straight onto here, no problem. Done around 200 miles with this setup so far, and it's been rock solid, no problems. There is a little bit of movement engineered in apparently, just so that if you're off-road it takes out some of the shock from the sat-nav unit itself. The mileage has been on tarmac roads, although in North Wales they're doing what we call in the UK surface dressing, which means throwing a load of tar and gravel on the road surface and basically walking away whistling to yourself and leaving it. So that's always fun on a bike. Can't really call it off-roading though. So summary then, it was pretty easy to fit a sat-nav to the V85TT in the end, I felt. To do a neater job I'd need to remove the side panels and possibly the tank and route the wiring along a frame rail or something, but my lazy option seems to be working okay at the moment. I do have a love-hate relationship with sat-navs. I'm from the era when you basically had to use maps and write down directions on top of your tank bag if you wanted to go anywhere, or just remember it. It's quite nice having something telling you which way to go. That makes life a lot easier. But I also often find them quite frustrating. I usually have a route that I want to take, even if I've never been there before. I'll choose the roads I want to travel on, and sometimes it's a big effort trying to convince the sat-nav to take the actual route you want to take. Well, final thing regarding power, I have seen online some people actually access the back of the built-in USB socket and tap power off of that to take up to their sat-nav unit. So that would mean you wouldn't have to worry about any of this wiring or connectors or anything. If you're reasonably happy with electrical systems and you can do that, that might be a good option as well. Then you've only got a short wire from the back of the instruments up to your sat-nav. So there's another option there. Okay, that's more than enough waffling. Thanks for watching.